The stars stretched endlessly across the void, cold and distant, like ancient witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations long forgotten. Silence ruled here. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating silence of deep space, where even light felt alone. Then, something broke it. A shadow. At first, it was nothing more than a distortion against the starfield, a subtle warping of reality itself. But as it grew, the illusion shattered, revealing something immense. A warship. No, not just a warship. A monument to power. The vessel emerged fully from faster-than-light transit, its massive frame unfolding like a blade being drawn from darkness. Its surface gleamed with polished metallic precision, reflecting starlight in cold, calculated angles. Every inch of it screamed perfection. No wasted space, no unnecessary structure. Pure efficiency. Behind it, space fractured again. And again. And again. One by one, an entire fleet arrived. Dozens of warships snapping into formation with mechanical precision. Each identical in design philosophy, each radiating quiet, absolute dominance. Together, they formed a formation so precise it looked artificial. Because it was. At the center of it all stood the flagship. Eclipse Sovereign. On its command bridge, a tall figure stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back as he stared into the vastness ahead. Supreme Commander Varex. His eyes, sharp, calculating, inhuman, reflected streams of data cascading across the transparent displays surrounding him. Every movement, every signal, every particle within range, mapped, analyzed, understood. Control. That was the foundation of the Empire. Not chaos. Not chance. Control. Status, Varex said calmly, his voice low but absolute. A subordinate stepped forward instantly. All systems operating at peak efficiency, Commander. Fleet formation stable. No threats detected within sensor range. Of course not. There never were. Varex allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to form. For 10,000 cycles, he said quietly, no civilization has stood against us. No one responded. They didn't need to. It was not a statement meant for discussion. It was fact. Behind him, a massive holographic display shifted, revealing a small, insignificant system at the edge of mapped space. A yellow star. 8 planets. One of them highlighted. Blue. Target world identified, another officer reported. Primitive classification confirmed. Technological development level, minimal. Varex studied the planet in silence. Clouds drifted across its surface. Oceans shimmered. Artificial lights flickered faintly along the darkened hemisphere. Tiny scars of civilization clinging to a fragile world. Insignificant. And yet, life forms. Varex asked. Dominant species identified. Self-designation. Human. The word lingered strangely in the air. Human. Unremarkable. Unproven. Irrelevant. Capabilities. He continued. The officer hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough to be noticed. They have achieved limited orbital travel. Satellite networks active. Crude propulsion systems based on chemical combustion. No evidence of advanced weaponization beyond their planet. A few faint chuckles echoed across the bridge. Primitive. Predictable. Harmless. Varex said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on the blue world, unblinking. Estimated time to orbital position, he asked. 3 standard hours, Commander. Silence returned. Heavy. Anticipatory. Varex slowly stepped forward, the stars shifting across the viewing glass as the fleet adjusted its trajectory. Prepare first contact protocols, he ordered. A pause. Then. And initiate intimidation formation. The bridge came alive instantly. Commands flowed. Systems adjusted. The fleet behind them began to move, warships sliding into a new configuration, one designed not for battle, but for dominance, for fear, for submission. It had worked before. Every time. Thousands of species. Thousands of worlds. All different. All the same in the end. They saw the fleet. And they understood. Resistance was pointless. Varex exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. "Let's see," he murmured, almost to himself. "If these humans understand as well." Far ahead, the small blue planet continued its quiet rotation, completely unaware that something unstoppable was already on its way. The Imperial fleet did not rush. It never needed to. Speed was a tool of uncertainty, used by those who feared losing control. The Empire had no such weakness. Every movement, every maneuver, was calculated with absolute precision. As the fleet advanced, space itself seemed to part for it. Ahead, the small yellow star system grew larger on the main display. Planets drifted in silent orbits, unaware that their existence had already been evaluated and judged. On the bridge of the Eclipse Sovereign, Commander Varex observed it all with detached interest. "Display historical records," he ordered. The air shimmered as a massive holographic projection filled the chamber. Worlds. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Each marked with a single symbol, the sigil of the Empire. "Cycle 3441, an officer began, his voice steady and rehearsed. "First recorded expansion beyond our origin system. Initial contact with foreign civilizations resulted in 87% voluntary assimilation." The projection shifted. More worlds lit up. Cycle 5902. Resistance encountered in the outer clusters. Duration of conflict, 3 standard days. A faint murmur of amusement passed through the bridge. 3 days. Not even a war. Just correction. Cycle 7118. Formation of the Unified Imperial Doctrine. All species offered integration under protection. Non-compliance classified as hostility. The display pulsed once more, expanding outward into a vast network of controlled systems. A galaxy shaped by a single will. The Empire did not conquer. It absorbed. Efficiently. Inevitably. Commander Varex watched the projection without emotion. "Total number of integrated civilizations?" he asked. 3,211, Commander. "And how many successfully resisted?" A pause. "None." Silence followed. Not the silence of uncertainty, but of confirmation. This was the natural order of things. Strength recognized. Resistance erased. Behind Varex, Commander Ilix stepped forward, his tone carrying a trace of quiet satisfaction. "There has never been a species capable of challenging Imperial doctrine," he said. "Every civilization believes itself unique, until it sees the fleet." Varex's gaze shifted slightly toward him. "And after they see it?" Ilix allowed himself a thin smile. "They understand." The holographic display shifted again, now focusing on a single point. The blue planet, Earth. Compared to the vast network of Imperial territory, it looked insignificant. A minor anomaly at the edge of relevance. "Detailed analysis," Varex said. Data streams flooded the air. Population density, energy consumption, communication networks, military capability, all reduced to numbers. All underwhelming. Fragmented political structure, an officer reported. Multiple governing bodies. No unified planetary command. Internal conflicts. Ongoing. Historical pattern suggests continuous division. Military capability. Primitive. Projectile-based weaponry. Limited nuclear arsenal. No interstellar combat readiness. Another quiet ripple of amusement. They weren't even unified. Not even stable. Spacefaring capability. Varex continued. Minimal. Chemical propulsion systems. Slow, inefficient, highly unstable. Maximum range, local satellite and lunar operations. Ilix exhaled softly. "They haven't even left their cradle," he said. "And yet they transmit signals into the void as if someone is listening." Varex didn't respond. His eyes remained locked on the planet. "Cultural assessment?" he asked. A different officer stepped forward this time. "Highly diverse." Rapid technological evolution over short periods. However, inconsistent development patterns. Inconsistent. Varex repeated. Yes, Commander. Their advancements do not follow a linear efficiency model. They often pursue multiple competing solutions simultaneously. Ilix let out a quiet scoff. Inefficient, he said. Wasteful. Unrefined, another officer added. Primitive thinking. Varex remained silent. The data continued to scroll. Wars. Inventions. Collapses. Rebuilds. Again and again. A chaotic pattern. Unpredictable. Messy. And yet, they survived, Varex said quietly. The room stilled. Ilix frowned slightly. Barely, he replied. Their history is filled with self-inflicted destruction. They lack unity, discipline, direction. And yet, Varex interrupted, his voice still calm, they are still here. That ended the discussion. Commander, a sensor officer spoke up suddenly. We are approaching the outer boundary of their system. The star now filled a larger portion of the display. Planets became clearer. Orbital paths visible. And then, movement. Small. Erratic. Insignificant. Multiple objects detected near the third planet, the officer continued. Artificial. Likely satellites and primitive stations. The display zoomed in. Tiny metal structures drifted in orbit. Fragile. Exposed. Crude. They built those. Ilix asked, unimpressed. Yes, Commander. He studied them for a moment, then shook his head. They send fragile machines into space, powered by explosions, he said. And they expect to be taken seriously. A few officers chuckled. Varex did not. Any defensive formations? He asked. None detected. No coordinated fleet. No energy shielding. No orbital weapons platforms. Communication attempts. Not yet. It appears they have not fully detected us. Varex stepped closer to the viewing glass. The planet rotated slowly beneath them now. Blue. Alive. Unaware. Primitive, Ilix said again. This time, Varex responded. Yes, he said. A pause. Then. But not silent. The officers glanced at each other. Commander. One asked. Varex's eyes narrowed slightly as new data flickered across his display. Those signals they send into space, he said. They are not random. No, Commander. They appear to be attempts at communication. Not attempts, Varex corrected quietly. Declarations. The word lingered. Uncomfortable. Unfitting. For a species this small. Ilix shook his head. They're shouting into darkness, hoping something hears them, he said. They don't understand what answers might come. Varex finally looked away from the planet. Correct, he said. Then, after a brief pause. They don't. Commander, the navigation officer announced, we have reached optimal position for contact. The fleet behind them shifted instantly. Warships aligning. Spacing perfect. Angles precise. A formation designed to dominate every visual sensor on the planet below. Not aggressive. Not yet. But unmistakable. Impossible to ignore. Ilix folded his hands behind his back, satisfaction clear in his posture. This is the moment, he said. The realization phase. Varex nodded once. Open communication channels, he ordered. A brief silence. Then, channels open, Commander. Varex straightened slightly. His voice, when it came, was calm. Controlled. Absolute. This is Commander Varex of the Imperial Dominion, he began. Below them, on that small blue world. Everything was about to change. For a brief moment. Nothing happened. The transmission hung in silence, stretching across the void between two civilizations that had never met, one ancient and absolute, the other young and unpredictable. On the bridge of the Eclipse Sovereign, several officers exchanged faint, amused glances. They don't respond, one of them muttered. Perhaps they don't understand, another added. Or perhaps, Ilix said with quiet satisfaction, they finally realized what they're facing. Commander Verex remained still. Waiting. Watching. Then. Incoming signal detected. The words cut through the room instantly. All eyes snapped toward the main display as it flickered to life. Static. Distortion. Then. A face appeared. Human. He wasn't what they expected. No visible fear. No confusion. No awe. The man sat upright, shoulders squared, his posture relaxed but deliberate. Behind him, a dimly lit command room pulsed with quiet activity. Screens, operators, movement, controlled, organized. Not chaos. Not panic. Controlled. Unknown fleet, the human said, his voice steady, clear. You have entered restricted orbital space. A pause. Then. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Silence. Not from the humans. From the Imperial Bridge. Ilix frowned slightly. That's it, he said under his breath. No fear response. No one answered. Because they were all noticing the same thing. The human's eyes. Calm. Focused. Unshaken. Commander Verex stepped forward into view. I am Commander Verex of the Imperial Dominion, he said, his tone even. Your world has been observed and deemed suitable for integration. The human didn't react. Not even slightly. We offer you inclusion, Verex continued, as a protected civilization under Imperial authority. In return, your species will receive security, technological advancement, and purpose within a greater system. Still nothing. No visible emotion. No hesitation. The human leaned forward slightly. And if we decline? He asked. The question landed harder than any weapon. Several officers stiffened. Ilix's expression darkened. They don't understand, he whispered. Verex, however, paused. Not long. But enough. Declination, he said slowly, would be unwise. The human's gaze didn't shift. Unwise how? He asked. Ilix took a step forward, unable to contain himself. You stand before a fleet that has ended civilizations more advanced than yours in less than a cycle, he said sharply. You have no defense, no unity, no capability to resist. Commander, Verex said calmly. Ilix stopped. Stepped back. Silence returned. Verex looked directly at the human. Your species faces a universe far more dangerous than you understand, he said. Our protection is not a threat. It is an opportunity. The human considered that. For a moment. Then. We appreciate the offer, he said. A pause. But we're not interested. The words echoed through the bridge like a fracture. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just, final. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. One even let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. They refused, he whispered. Based on what? Another added. They don't even know what we are. Ilix stepped forward again, his voice tightening. You misunderstand your position, he said. This is not a negotiation. This is a first contact, the human interrupted calmly. Silence. Again. But this time, heavier. We've been expecting this moment, the human continued. Maybe not you specifically, but someone. That caught attention. Verex's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain, he said. The human leaned back in his chair. Your fleet, he said. It's impressive. Clean design. Efficient. Coordinated. A faint pause. Predictable. That word shifted something. Ilix scoffed. Predictable, he repeated. You haven't even left your own system. True, the human said. And yet, here you are. No fear. No submission. Just observation. Measured. Intentional. What is your designation? Verex asked. The human met his gaze directly. General Arman Rahman, he replied. Earth Defense Command. Earth. Defense. The words registered. Slowly. Carefully. You consider this a defensive scenario? Varex asked. General Rahman didn't hesitate. You entered our system unannounced, he said. You positioned a military fleet in orbit. A pause. You tell me. No anger. No raised voice. Just facts. Varex studied him. Longer this time. You cannot defend against us, Ilix said, his patience thinning. Your technology is primitive. Your systems are exposed. We know, Rahman said. And for the first time. Someone interrupted without hesitation. Ilix stopped. Caught off guard. Rahman continued. We know exactly where we stand, he said. We know what you see when you look at us. A slight tilt of his head. Primitive. Divided. Weak. No denial. No argument. Just acknowledgement. That's your assessment, Rahman said. And it's not entirely wrong. That confused them. Varex's focus sharpened. Then your refusal is illogical, he said. Rahman smiled slightly. Not arrogantly. Not mockingly. Just knowingly. Maybe, he said. Or maybe you're missing something. The bridge fell completely silent. Because now, there was something else in his voice. Not confidence. Not defiance. Something deeper. Something controlled. You should reconsider your approach, Rahman added calmly. First impressions matter. Ilix let out a sharp breath. Are you threatening us? He demanded. Rahman shook his head. No, he said. A pause. Just giving you a chance. The transmission ended. Just like that. No dramatic exit. No escalation. Just silence. On the Imperial Bridge, no one spoke. For the first time since entering the system. Something felt off. Commander Varex remained still, staring at the now dark screen. Behind him, Ilix's voice broke the quiet. They're bluffing, he said. They have to be. No one responded. Because no one was entirely sure anymore. Varex finally spoke. Prepare a forward probe, he said. His voice was calm. But quieter than before. Let's test what we're missing. Far below. On that primitive blue world. Humanity had just made one thing very clear. They were not afraid. The silence after the transmission didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. On the bridge of the Eclipse Sovereign, the air itself seemed tighter, as if something unseen had shifted the balance ever so slightly. Commander Varex stood motionless, eyes fixed on the darkened display where the human had been moments ago. No fear. No submission. No desperation. It didn't fit. They're posturing, Ilix said, his voice firm but edged with irritation. A common tactic among underdeveloped species. They exaggerate confidence to mask weakness. Varex didn't respond immediately. Perhaps, he said after a moment. But his tone carried something new. Uncertainty. Commander, the sensor officer called out. We are detecting increased activity on the planet's surface. The main display shifted instantly. Earth filled the screen again, but now it was alive with movement. Signals spiking. Energy fluctuations. Launch signatures. They're mobilizing, another officer reported. Ilix scoffed. With what? Their combustion relics. Displaying orbital activity, the system responded. The view zoomed in. Dozens of small objects were launching from the planet's surface. Thin, cylindrical shapes tearing through the atmosphere with violent bursts of flame. Primitive. Crude. Inefficient. But they're fast, the sensor officer added, surprised. Acceleration rates exceeding expected limits. Varex's eyes narrowed. How many? He asked. Dozens, no, hundreds. The small vessels began spreading out, forming loose, irregular patterns around the planet. Not organized. Not symmetrical. But intentional. They're trying to form a defensive grid, Ilix said dismissively. It's chaotic. Uncoordinated. Yes, Varex said quietly. But not random. Commander, another voice cut in, sharper this time. We're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet. Audio only, the officer added. Broadcasting on open frequencies. Play it. The bridge filled with overlapping human voices. Different languages. Different tones. But all carrying the same message. Unidentified fleet, you are in violation of Earth's orbital sovereignty. Withdraw immediately or you will be engaged. This is a final warning. The transmissions repeated. Over and over. Layered. Persistent. They're unified, one officer noted quietly. Ilix turned sharply. Impossible, he snapped. Their own data confirms internal division. Politically, yes, the officer replied. But this is coordinated. Varex said nothing. He was watching the patterns. Listening. Analyzing. They're not panicking, he said. They're aligning. Commander. The navigation officer spoke again. A single vessel is breaking formation from the planet. The display shifted. One ship. Small. Box-like. Crude in design. It accelerated rapidly, leaving the others behind. Intercept trajectory. Varex asked. Directly toward our forward position. Ilix laughed. One ship, he said. They send one ship. Perhaps a communication envoy, another officer suggested. Or a symbolic gesture, someone added. No, Varex said quietly. Everyone looked at him. That's not symbolic, he continued. That's deliberate. Orders? The fleet commander asked. Varex didn't hesitate. Deploy a scout vessel, he said. Ahead of the fleet. Maintain distance. Observe only. Ilix frowned. You're taking this too seriously, he said. It's a primitive craft. Let me deal with it. Varex's gaze shifted slightly. No, he said. One word. Final. The scout ship detached from the fleet, gliding forward with smooth, effortless precision. Its sleek form contrasted sharply with the incoming human vessel, one engineered for perfection, the other, improvised. On the main screen, the distance between them closed rapidly. Human vessel speed increasing, the sensor officer reported. Acceleration curve is unstable. Unstable. Ilix repeated. Yes, Commander. It's fluctuating. Not optimized. Because it's primitive, Ilix said. Or, Varex replied quietly. Because it's adaptive. The human ship adjusted course mid-flight. Not smoothly. Not elegantly. But effectively. They're not following a fixed trajectory, the officer said. They're reacting in real time. To what? Ilix demanded. No one answered. Because the answer was obvious. To them. Distance closing, the system announced. Scout ship maintaining position. On screen, the difference in scale was almost absurd. The Imperial vessel, sleek, silent, precise. The human craft, boxy, reinforced, almost crude. And yet, it didn't slow down. Are they attempting to dock? One officer asked. Impossible, another replied. They don't have the capability. Then what are they? Commander, the sensor officer interrupted suddenly. Energy spike detected on the human vessel. The room stilled. What kind of energy? Varex asked. The officer hesitated. Low level, but concentrated. That's not a weapon, Ilix said dismissively. It's probably a propulsion fluctuation. But Varex didn't look convinced. Maintain distance, he ordered. Tell the scout ship to increase separation. Transmitting. Too late, the officer shouted. The human vessel surged forward. Faster than before. Not smoothly. Not cleanly. But violently. It closed the final gap in seconds. And then. It attached. What are they doing? Ilix snapped. No one had an answer. On the screen, the human craft had physically latched onto the Imperial scout ship's hull. No energy weapons. No visible attack. Just contact. Detach them, Ilix ordered. Activate defensive protocols. Commander, the sensor officer shouted. Energy spike, rapid increase. A flash. Blinding. Instant. Then, darkness. When the screen stabilized, the Imperial scout ship was still there. Floating. Drifting. But no lights. No movement. No response. Status. Varex demanded. Silence. Then, all systems offline, the officer said, disbelief in his voice. Complete shutdown. Ilix stared at the screen. That's not possible, he said. They didn't fire anything. They didn't need to, Varex replied. The human vessel detached. Clean. Efficient. And then, it turned. And began accelerating back toward Earth. Untouched. Unharmed. Unstoppable. Analysis, Varex said sharply. The science officer scrambled through the data. Electromagnetic pulse, he said finally. Localized. Directed. Extremely precise. Primitive technology, Ilix said quickly, trying to regain control of the narrative. Yes, the officer replied slowly. Primitive, but perfectly executed. Silence fell over the bridge again. But this time, it was different. Not confidence. Not dominance. Something else. Something colder. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said quietly. The screen flickered. General Rahman reappeared. Same posture. Same calm expression. No change. That was a warning, he said. No anger. No pride. Just fact. We prefer not to escalate, he continued. But we will defend ourselves. A pause. You have 24 hours to leave our system. The transmission ended. Again. Without drama. Without noise. Without fear. On the Imperial Bridge. No one spoke. Because now, they understood something. Not everything. But enough. Commander Varex looked at the drifting scout ship. Then at the retreating human vessel. Then back to Earth. His voice, when it came, was quieter than before. Recall the fleet, he said. Ilix turned sharply. Commander. That was not an attack, Varex continued. It was a demonstration. Silence. Then. We need to reassess. Far below. Humanity had just done something no species had ever done before. They didn't beg. They didn't panic. They didn't submit. They warned. And the Empire, for the first time in thousands of cycles, listened. The fleet didn't move. Not immediately. For something that had crossed galaxies without hesitation, the pause was unnatural. On the bridge of the Eclipse Sovereign, every eye remained fixed on the drifting scout vessel. Dark. Silent. Helpless. An Imperial ship, designed with flawless precision, protected by layers of advanced systems, reduced to nothing. Without a single visible weapon fired. Status update, Commander Varex said. His voice was calm. But tighter. The science officer hesitated before answering. Systems are attempting reboot cycles, he said. Core functions are intact, but completely disabled. How? Ilix demanded. Explain how a primitive craft did this. The officer swallowed. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't broad spectrum, he said slowly. It was targeted. Targeted. Varex repeated. Yes, Commander. It didn't just overload the systems, it mapped them first. It struck specific nodes in sequence, maximizing disruption while minimizing energy use. Silence. That wasn't primitive. That was intentional. They got lucky, Ilix said quickly. A random strike. No, Varex interrupted. One word. Sharp. Final. That was not random. On the main display, a replay of the encounter began. The human vessel approached again, frame by frame. Unstable trajectory. Erratic acceleration. Imperfect movement. And yet, every correction brought it closer. Every adjustment improved its angle. They were learning, one officer whispered. Not learning, Varex said quietly. Adapting. The moment of contact played again. The attachment. The energy spike. The pulse. Then darkness. Clean. Efficient. Final. They didn't destroy the ship, another officer noted. They chose not to. That realization settled heavily over the room. Because destruction would have been simpler. Easier. But this required control. Precision. Restraint. Commander, the communications officer said. Multiple transmissions incoming from the planet again. Play them. The voices returned. Same message. Same tone. But now, they felt different. Withdraw immediately. You have been warned. Do not escalate. There was no desperation in the words. No fear. Only certainty. They expected this, one officer said quietly. Ilix turned toward him sharply. Expected? He snapped. They can't possibly. They were ready, the officer clarified. Silence followed. Because that possibility was worse. Commander Varex stepped closer to the display. Run predictive models, he ordered. Simulate engagement scenarios. The system responded instantly. Holographic projections filled the air. Battle simulations. Outcome calculations. Probabilities. Then, error. Simulation failure, the system announced. Ilix frowned. Why? Insufficient data, the system replied. Human technology parameters unknown. That's impossible, Ilix said. We've scanned their entire system. Yes, the system responded. And yet, we are missing something. That phrase echoed. Missing something. Again. Varex's gaze shifted back to Earth. The planet looked the same. Calm. Peaceful. Unchanged. But now, it felt different. Commander, the sensor officer said quietly. We're detecting additional energy fluctuations from the human orbital grid. The display zoomed in. Those small, scattered vessels, the ones they had dismissed earlier, were still moving. Still adjusting. Still positioning. They're not retreating, the officer added. They're reinforcing. Reinforcing what? Ilix demanded. They don't have a fleet. Varex didn't answer. Because now, he wasn't looking at their ships. He was looking at their behavior. They didn't celebrate, he said quietly. What? The attack, Varex continued. There was no escalation. No pursuit. No attempt to capitalize on advantage. He paused. They executed a single action, and stopped. That was not how weaker species behaved. Weaker species panicked. Overreacted. Made mistakes. These humans did none of that. They're controlling the pace, one officer realized. The room went still. Because that meant they weren't reacting. They were leading. Ilix shook his head, refusing to accept it. One successful strike doesn't change anything, he said. We still outmatch them in every measurable way. Do we? Varex asked quietly. That question landed harder than any argument. No one answered. Because for the first time, they weren't sure. Commander, the communications officer said again. Another direct transmission. The screen flickered. General Rahman appeared once more. Same posture. Same calm. Same eyes. Unshaken. You've seen what we're capable of, he said. No arrogance. No threat. Just truth. That was the smallest demonstration we could give. A pause. We don't want conflict. Another pause. But we won't avoid it. Varex watched him closely, analyzing every detail, every micro-expression, every tone shift, looking for fear. There was none. You had the opportunity to destroy our vessel, Varex said. Rahman nodded slightly. Yes. Why didn't you? Another small pause. Then, because that would have escalated things, Rahman replied. Simple. Direct. Logical. You believe you can win, Ilix said, stepping forward. Rahman looked at him. Not dismissively. Not aggressively. Just, evenly. We believe, he said, That you should reconsider. The transmission ended. Again. No theatrics. No noise. Just silence. On the Imperial Bridge. Everything had changed. Not visibly. Not structurally. But internally. The Empire had faced countless species. Countless wars. Countless victories. But never this. Not a species that refused fear. Not a species that showed restraint. Not a species that demonstrated power. And then chose not to use it. Commander Verex exhaled slowly. Set course, he said. Withdraw to observation distance. Ilix turned sharply. We're leaving. No, Verex replied. His eyes remained on Earth. We're thinking. Because now, this wasn't a conquest. It was a problem. And for the first time in thousands of cycles, the Empire didn't have an immediate solution. Far below, humanity continued its quiet preparation. Uncelebrated. Unseen. Unshaken. And somewhere deep within the Imperial command structure, a single, uncomfortable realization began to form. They had underestimated the wrong species. 3 months passed. For most civilizations, it would have been an insignificant span of time, barely enough to reorganize, let alone evolve. For the Empire, it was more than enough to investigate. Deep within the Imperial core, far from the edges of map space, the council chambers of Dominion Prime pulsed with controlled tension. Massive pillars of light rose from the polished floor, each representing a sector of the Empire. Thousands of systems, all connected, all monitored, all stable, all predictable. Until now, at the center of the chamber stood Commander Verex. Alone. Before him, a projection of Earth rotated slowly, its blue surface deceptively calm. Behind him, elevated above all others, sat the High Executor. A being older than most recorded stars in the system, its presence radiating authority that needed no display. You are certain, the Executor said, its voice deep and measured, that a primitive species disabled an Imperial vessel. It wasn't a question. It was a test. Verex didn't hesitate. Yes. A pause. And you chose not to retaliate. Another test. Yes. The chamber remained silent. But the weight of attention increased. Explain. Verex raised a hand slightly. The air shifted. Data unfolded. The encounter replayed in perfect detail, every movement, every signal, every anomaly. The human vessel. Its erratic trajectory. Its sudden precision. The pulse. The shutdown. They demonstrated controlled electromagnetic disruption, Verex said. Localized. Targeted. Efficient. Primitive technology, one council member said immediately. Primitive origin, Verex corrected. Advanced execution. That distinction mattered. More than anyone in the room wanted to admit. They used less energy than our smallest defensive systems, another voice noted. And achieved total system failure. How? No one answered. Because the answer wasn't in the data. They adapt, Verex said. That word again. Unwelcome. Uncomfortable. Adaptation is inefficient, a counselor replied. Optimization is superior. That has always been our assumption, Verex said. A pause. Perhaps, incorrectly. That shifted the room. Not dramatically, but enough. Because doubt was not a common occurrence here. Continue observation, the Executor ordered. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Learn. And so the Empire watched. At first, nothing happened. Earth continued its rotation. Its signals. Its internal activity. No visible military expansion. No fleet mobilization. No retaliation. They're stagnant, one analyst reported after several cycles. No significant technological escalation detected. Impossible, another said. They demonstrated capability beyond their level. Perhaps it was an anomaly. Or luck. Or deception. But Verex wasn't convinced. Expand sensor range, he ordered. Focus beyond their immediate system. That was when things changed. Commander, the sensor officer said slowly. We're detecting an anomaly. Location. Outer edge of Sector 9. The display shifted. A distant region of space, far from Earth. Far from anything significant. Energy signature detected. The officer continued. Unknown configuration. Magnitude. A pause. Then, increasing. Zoom. The projection sharpened. And for a moment, no one spoke. Because what they were looking at didn't make sense. A vessel. Massive. Drifting at the edge of detection. Its structure. Wrong. Not elegant. Not refined. Not imperial. It was overbuilt. Thick armored plating layered across its surface. Multiple redundant structures. No clear central core. No optimization. No efficiency. Identify, Verex said. Silence. Then, no match in Imperial database. That alone was impossible. Origin? Ilix asked. The officer hesitated. Then, human. The word landed heavier this time. Not dismissive. Not irrelevant. Just real. That can't be correct, Ilix said. Their technological level does not support this, the officer finished. Confirmed. The ship moved. Not fast. Not aggressively. But deliberately. Trajectory. Verex asked. Intercept course, the officer replied. With us. Silence filled the chamber again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was anticipation. They're coming to us, one council member said. Why? No one answered. Because there were too many possibilities. None of them comfortable. Open passive scans, Verex ordered. I want everything. Data flooded in. Power readings. Structural analysis. Signal patterns. Then, another anomaly. Commander, the science officer said. Power source identified. Type. A pause. Fusion. That wasn't surprising. What came next was. But the containment method. The officer stopped. Struggling. Explain, Verex said. It shouldn't be stable, the officer replied. The energy output required to maintain that reaction exceeds the structural limits. And yet, it's stable. How? The officer looked up. Confused. Genuinely. It's not using energy containment, he said. Silence. Then, it's using materials. That broke something. Materials. Ilix repeated. Yes. Physical containment layers. Multiple. Reinforced. Redundant. That's inefficient, another voice said immediately. It's impossible, someone else added. And yet, Verex said quietly. The ship continued its approach. Unhurried. Unconcerned. They're hailing us, the communications officer said. Verex didn't move. Didn't speak. For a moment. Then, on screen, the display flickered. And a human appeared. Different this time. Not a general. Not defensive. Confident. Calm. Unfamiliar. This is Captain Elias Kane, the human said. Commanding vessel Aegis. Behind him. No chaos. No noise. Just quiet efficiency. We come in peace, Kane continued. A pause. Then. But we prefer to be understood correctly this time. No arrogance. No threat. Just clarity. Verex studied him. Longer than before. You've expanded beyond your system, Verex said. Faster than projected. Kane smiled slightly. We didn't expand, he said. A pause. We prepared. That sentence changed everything. Your capabilities were not observed during initial contact, Verex said. They weren't displayed, Kane replied. Another pause. First impressions matter, he added. Verex's eyes narrowed. Recognition. You concealed your advancement. Kane shook his head. No, he said. We just didn't show it to someone who arrived with warships. Silence. Because now, the pattern was clearer. This wasn't improvisation. This wasn't luck. This was intention. You misled us, Ilix said sharply. Kane looked at him. Calm. Unbothered. No, he said. You misjudged us. That landed harder than anything before. State your purpose, Varek said. Kane leaned slightly forward. Simple, he said. Let's try this again. A pause. Properly. Behind him, the massive human ship drifted in silence. Unrefined. Inefficient. Overbuilt. And somehow, more dangerous than anything the Empire had ever faced. Because now, they knew something they hadn't known before. Humans didn't follow the same path. And that meant, they didn't follow the same rules. The distance between the two vessels closed slowly. Deliberately. On one side, the Empire's Eclipse sovereign, flawless, efficient, perfected over thousands of cycles. On the other, the human vessel Aegis, layered, reinforced, excessive, unrefined, unfamiliar. Docking request received, the communications officer reported. Ilix frowned immediately. You're allowing them aboard? He asked. Varex didn't look away from the screen. Yes. That's unnecessary risk. That's information, Varex corrected. A pause. Granted. Minutes later, the docking bay doors opened. The human shuttle entered without hesitation. No escorts. No visible weapons. Just controlled movement. Confidence. Inside the Imperial vessel, security units lined the corridor, silent, prepared, watching. The shuttle door opened. 3 humans stepped out. No armor. No visible augmentation. No fear. At the front stood Captain Elias Kane. Behind him, a woman, older, observant, analytical. And a third figure, quiet, alert. They're exposed, one officer whispered. They don't think they are, another replied. The humans were escorted to the central chamber. A room designed to impose scale, height, authority, control. It didn't work. Captain Kane stepped forward calmly. Commander Varex, he said. Varex inclined his head slightly. Captain Kane. No intimidation. No dominance. Just acknowledgement. You requested dialogue, Varex said. You have it. Kane nodded once. Good, he replied. Then, he gestured slightly toward the woman beside him. Dr. Lyanna Hart, he said. Lead systems architect. The woman stepped forward. Her eyes moved across the chamber, not with curiosity, but with evaluation. You've been studying us, she said. Not a question. Yes, Varex replied. And you're confused. A pause. No denial. That's expected, she continued. You're looking at our technology the wrong way. Ilix crossed his arms. There is only one correct way to evaluate technology, he said. Efficiency. Dr. Hart smiled faintly. That's where you went wrong. The room stilled. Varex leaned slightly forward. Explain. Dr. Hart raised her hand. A small device activated. A holographic projection appeared between them. 2 ships. Side by side. One. Imperial. Sleek. Minimal. Elegant. The other. Human. Layered. Dense. Redundant. This is the difference, she said. She pointed to the Imperial ship. You build systems like precision instruments, she explained. Every component optimized. Every function streamlined. No excess. She shifted her hand. To the human ship. We don't. Silence. That's not an explanation, Ilix said. That's an admission of inefficiency. Dr. Hart shook her head. No, she said. It's an admission of priorities. She zoomed in on the Imperial reactor core. A single, centralized structure. Elegant. Perfect. If this fails, she said, what happens? It doesn't fail, Ilix replied immediately. Dr. Hart didn't react. She zoomed in further. If it did. A pause. Total system collapse, one of the Imperial engineers said quietly. Dr. Hart nodded. Exactly. She shifted the display, now showing the human reactor. It wasn't one core. It was many. Layered. Interconnected. Messy. If one fails? She asked. No one answered. Nothing, she said. We route around it. That landed. You sacrifice efficiency, Ilix said. We sacrifice fragility, she corrected. The projection shifted again. Weapons systems. Imperial, energy-based, precise, advanced. Human, mechanical launch systems, reinforced rails, kinetic chambers. Primitive, Ilix muttered. Reliable, Kane replied. Dr. Hart continued. You focus on energy projection, she said. Clean. Elegant. Efficient. She zoomed in on the human weapons. We focus on momentum. A pause. Mass, she said. Acceleration. Silence. Physics, Kane added. One of the Imperial officers frowned. That's basic. Yes, Dr. Hart said. And it works. The projection shifted again. Defensive systems. Imperial, energy shields, layered fields, reactive barriers. Human. Nothing visible. You don't have shields, Ilix said. Kane smiled slightly. No, he said. We just bend space. Silence. That's not possible, one officer whispered. It wasn't, Dr. Hart said. Until we stopped trying to make it efficient. That phrase. Again. Varex stepped forward slightly. You deliberately choose less optimal solutions, he said. Dr. Hart nodded. Yes. Why? Kane answered this time. Because optimal systems break, he said. A pause. And when they break, they fail completely. He gestured toward the projection. We build systems that keep working. Another pause. Even when they shouldn't. The room went still. Because that idea was foreign. The Empire pursued perfection. Precision. Control. Humans. They pursued survival. Messy. Redundant. Unpredictable. Effective. You built an entire technological philosophy around failure, Varex said. No, Dr. Hart corrected. We built it around reality. Silence. Kane stepped forward slightly. You think we're primitive, he said. No, Varex replied. I think you're different. Kane nodded. That's the point. A pause. You optimized your path, he continued. We explored ours. The projection faded. The room remained silent. Because now, the difference wasn't just technology. It was thinking. Your systems are inefficient, Ilix said again. But this time, it didn't sound as confident. Dr. Hart smiled slightly. And yours, she said, are predictable. That hit hard. Because predictable. Could be countered. Could be beaten. Varex looked at the human ship on the display again. Overbuilt. Unrefined. Dangerous. You didn't just develop differently, he said slowly. You developed around us. Kane didn't deny it. We prepared for what we thought we'd face, he said. A pause. Turns out, we were right. Silence. Heavy. Because now, the Empire understood something critical. This wasn't a weaker species catching up. This was a different kind of intelligence entirely. One that didn't follow the same rules. One that didn't make the same assumptions. And that made them unpredictable. And unpredictable was dangerous. Very dangerous. Kane took a small step back. We're not here to fight, he said. A pause. But we're not here to lose either. The message was clear. No threats. No aggression. Just certainty. And that certainty was far more unsettling than fear. The humans left without incident. No sudden moves. No hidden aggression. No attempt to exploit their position. The shuttle departed the Eclipse Sovereign just as calmly as it had arrived, slipping back toward the massive hull of the Aegis like it had never been in danger at all. That unsettled everyone. On the bridge, silence lingered long after the docking bay doors sealed. Commander Varex stood at the viewing glass, watching the human vessel drift in the distance. Unmoving, unthreatening, and yet, everything about it felt wrong. They exposed everything, Ilix said finally, his voice tight. Their systems. Their philosophy. Their approach. A pause. That was a mistake. Varex didn't respond. They wanted us to see it, another officer said quietly. Ilix turned sharply. Why would they do that? No one answered. Because the answer was uncomfortable. They're not hiding, Varex said at last. The room shifted. They're demonstrating, he continued. A slow realization spread. They want us to understand, one officer murmured. Or, Ilix said coldly, they want us to hesitate. That landed. Because hesitation could be exploited. They've already shown capability, Ilix continued, stepping forward. They disabled one of our ships. They've revealed unconventional systems. Now they present themselves openly. He paused. That's not transparency. It's control. The word echoed. Varex finally turned away from the viewport. They believe we won't attack, he said. Because they think they've changed the equation, Ilix replied immediately. Have they? Varex asked. Silence. Because no one had an answer they trusted. Commander, the communications officer interrupted. Priority transmission from the core. The room stilled. Display. The projection shifted. The High Executor appeared, its presence filling the space without movement. Ancient. Measured. Unquestionable. Report, it said. Varex didn't hesitate. They are not what we assessed, he said. Their technological development diverges from Imperial models. Their systems prioritize resilience over efficiency. Their capabilities are unproven, the Executor interrupted. A pause. They disabled a scout vessel, it continued. A minor asset. Deliberately, Varex said. Insufficient data, the Executor replied. You allowed uncertainty to influence your judgment. The words carried weight. We chose observation over escalation, Varex said. You chose hesitation, the Executor corrected. Silence. Behind Varex, Ilix remained still. Watching. Listening. The Empire does not adjust its posture based on unverified anomalies, the Executor continued. Another pause. Demonstrate dominance. The words settled heavily into the chamber. Deploy a battle group, the Executor ordered. Evaluate their capabilities under controlled engagement. Controlled. Measured. Decisive. Varex's gaze hardened slightly. And if they respond beyond projections? He asked. The Executor's form pulsed faintly. Then we correct the projection. The transmission ended. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was inevitable. Ilix stepped forward. The decision is made, he said. Varex didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked back toward the human ship. Still there. Still waiting. As if it already knew. Prepare the fleet, Varex said quietly. Orders spread instantly. Across the void, Imperial warships began to move. Not chaotic. Not rushed. Perfect. 20 battlecruisers shifted into formation. Sleek, precise, lethal. Energy systems charging. Shield arrays stabilizing. Weapons aligning. A formation built for one purpose. Overwhelming force. They'll see this, one officer said. Yes, Ilix replied. And they'll understand. Across the void. They did. On the bridge of the Aegis, no alarm sounded. No panic spread. No urgency filled the air. Only quiet activity. Measured. Controlled. They've made their decision, one crew member said. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center, watching the Imperial fleet reorganize. Of course they have, he replied. No surprise. No frustration. Just confirmation. 20 ships, another officer added. Full battle formation. Dr. Hart glanced at the display. They're following their doctrine, she said. Overwhelming force. Centralized coordination. Predictable escalation. Kane nodded slightly. They think this is still their game, he said. A pause. Let them. Power systems, he asked. Stable, came the reply. Reactor operating at full capacity. Redundant systems online. Weapons. Ready. A slight pause. Waiting for authorization. Kane looked at the approaching fleet. Then, at the distance between them. Then, at nothing. Thinking. They still believe we're one ship, he said quietly. Dr. Hart didn't respond. But she understood. That's enough, Kane added. A subtle shift passed through the crew. Not fear. Focus. Open channel, Kane said. The transmission connected instantly. Commander Verex appeared on the screen. No emotion. No hesitation. Captain Kane, he said. Kane nodded slightly. Commander. A brief pause. This is your final opportunity to stand down, Verex continued. Submit to Imperial authority, and your species will be preserved. The words were calm, controlled, but behind them, final. Kane exhaled slowly. We've already answered that, he said. You've made a miscalculation, Verex replied. Kane tilted his head slightly. Have we? He asked. Another pause. You're about to find out. The transmission ended. On the Imperial bridge. Target their propulsion, Ilix ordered. Disable the vessel. We'll take it intact. Weapons systems locked. Energy levels peaked. Fire on my command, Verex said. Across the fleet. 20 warships aligned. Perfect. Silent. Then. Fire. Light erupted across space. Brilliant beams of energy surged forward. Precise, devastating, unstoppable. They crossed the distance in an instant. And struck. The human ship. For a fraction of a second. Everything froze. Then. Something impossible happened. The beams didn't hit. They bent. Curving around the ship. Sliding across invisible space. Missing. Every shot. Silence. Report, Verex said sharply. Energy weapons, ineffective, the officer replied, stunned. They're being redirected, distorted. How? Ilix demanded. No known shield system matches this behavior. On the screen, the human ship remained untouched, unmoved, unimpressed. And then, it began to change. Panels shifted. Structures opened. Systems activated. Not elegant. Not precise. But ready. Kane's voice came through the channel. Calm. Steady. You really should have listened. And just like that, the situation flipped. The Empire had made its move. And now, it was humanity's turn. For a fraction of a second. No one moved. Not on the Imperial bridge. Not on the human ship. Not even the void itself seemed to breathe. Because what had just happened should not have been possible. Fire again. Commander Verex's voice cut through the silence. Sharp, controlled. The fleet responded instantly. A second wave of energy surged forward. More concentrated, more precise, more destructive. Again. The beams struck. Again. They bent. Curving away from the human vessel as if reality itself refused to allow contact. Analysis. Ilix demanded. Gravitational distortion field, the science officer replied, voice shaking. They're not blocking our weapons, they're redirecting them. That's impossible, Ilix snapped. It was, the officer whispered. On the main display, the human ship remained exactly where it had been. No damage. No movement. No reaction. Like the attack hadn't mattered. Commander, another officer said urgently. They're powering up. The display zoomed in. Panels along the hull of the Aegis shifted open. Not sleek. Not hidden. Blunt. Mechanical. Rows of reinforced launch rails extended outward. Heavy. Industrial. Unmistakably physical. They're using projectile systems. Ilix said in disbelief. In space. Another officer added. Primitive, Ilix muttered. Sir, the sensor officer said slowly. Those projectiles. A pause. They're accelerating. How fast? The officer hesitated. Approaching relativistic velocity. Silence. That wasn't primitive. That was catastrophic. On the bridge of the Aegis, no one raised their voice. No one rushed. No one panicked. Firing solution complete, a crew member said. Target priority, another asked. Kane didn't hesitate. Disable first, he said. A pause. Destroy if necessary. Back on the Imperial flagship. Evasive maneuvers, Verex ordered. The fleet shifted instantly. Perfect coordination. Precise movement. But it didn't matter. Because they were already too late. The Aegis fired. There was no flash. No beam. No dramatic release of energy. Just silence. And then impact. One of the Imperial battlecruisers shuddered violently. No warning. No visible attack. Just a hole. Clean. Precise. Through the center of the ship. Systems failed instantly. Lights died. Engines cut. The vessel drifted. Dead. What just happened? Ilix shouted. They fired a kinetic projectile, the science officer said. Mass, minimal. Velocity, near light speed. A pause. Energy output. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Return fire. Ilix ordered. But the fleet was already firing. Energy weapons filled the void again. And again. They bent. Every shot. Every angle. Every vector. Useless. Shields ineffective, the officer said. We're not even hitting them. The Aegis fired again. Another Imperial ship. Gone. Not destroyed. Disabled. Precision strikes. Targeted. Calculated. They're not attacking randomly, Verex said. They're selecting targets. A pause. Systematically. Scatter formation. Ilix shouted. The fleet broke apart. Ships moving independently now. Trying to reduce predictability. Trying to survive. But the problem wasn't formation. It was understanding. They're predicting our movements, the navigation officer said. How? Ilix demanded. They're not reacting, Verex said quietly. They're calculating. Another shot. Another ship. Gone. 5 vessels down, the communications officer reported. 3 disabled. 2 destroyed. How? Ilix demanded again. How can one ship? Because we built for perfection, Verex said. A pause. And they built for reality. The words hung heavy. Because now. He understood. On the main screen. The human ship moved for the first time. Not fast. Not aggressively. Just enough. Adjusting position. Optimizing angle. Like it had been waiting. They're controlling the battlefield, one officer whispered. Another shot. Another ship. Gone. 7 vessels down. The Imperial fleet, the pride of the Empire, was collapsing. Commander. The weapons officer's voice shook. We can't hit them. On the screen, Captain Kane appeared. His expression was no longer neutral. It was serious. Focused. Commander Verex, he said. A pause. You've lost 8 ships. No emotion. Your weapons can't reach us. Another pause. Please stand down. Ilix stepped forward. Never, he said. Kane looked at him. Not with anger. Not with hatred. Just understanding. We warned you, Kane said. The transmission cut. The Aegis fired again. Another ship. Disabled. 10 vessels down, the officer reported. Half the fleet. Gone. In minutes. Stop this, Varek said quietly. No one moved. Stop this now. Commander. Illich said, stunned. We can't win this, Varek said. The words. Unthinkable. Cease fire, he ordered. Across the fleet. Silence spread. Weapons powered down. Movement slowed. The attack ended. For the first time in Imperial history. They retreated. On the main screen. The human ship remained still. No pursuit. No retaliation. No finishing blow. Just waiting. Captain Kane appeared once more. You made the right call, he said. A pause. We don't want to destroy you. Illich stared at the screen. What are you? He whispered. Kane's answer came calmly. Just human. Silence. Because that answer was worse than anything else. We took a different path, Kane continued. A pause. And now you're seeing where it leads. The transmission ended. On the Imperial Bridge. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say. They had come as conquerors. They had come as rulers. They had come as the strongest force in the galaxy. And they had been defeated. By one ship. Not through superior numbers. Not through overwhelming force. But through a different way of thinking. Commander Varek stared at the human vessel. Unmoving. Unthreatening. Untouchable. And for the first time in his entire existence, he felt something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. Because now, the Empire knew something it had never known before. It was no longer the strongest. And worse, it didn't understand what was. The silence that followed the battle was heavier than the fight itself. No weapons fired. No engines roared. No commands echoed. Just drifting wreckage. Fragments of Imperial warships, once symbols of perfection, now floated silently across the void. Some were intact but lifeless, their systems dark. Others were torn open, their flawless designs reduced to broken geometry. At the center of it all, the Aegis remained. Unharmed. Unchallenged. Status report, Commander Varek said. His voice was steady again. But different. 10 vessels disabled, the communications officer replied quietly. 4 destroyed. 6 recoverable. A pause. No casualties confirmed, yet. Varek nodded slowly. They spared us, one officer whispered. No one corrected him. Because it was true. Every shot. Every strike. Every decision. Had been controlled. Measured. Restrained. They could have ended this, another officer said. Yes, Varek replied. A pause. But they didn't. That fact lingered longer than anything else. Because destruction was expected. Mercy was not. Recall all remaining ships, Varek ordered. This time, no one questioned it. The fleet began to withdraw. Not in perfect formation. Not in synchronized precision. But carefully. Cautiously. Like something wounded. On the bridge, Illich stood motionless. His earlier confidence, his certainty, was gone. This doesn't make sense, he said quietly. No anger. No arrogance. Just confusion. They're inefficient, he continued. Redundant. Overbuilt. A pause. They shouldn't be able to do this. Varek looked at him. And yet, he said. They did. The main display shifted. Showing the human ship again. Still not pursuing. Still not advancing. Just watching. They're letting us leave, one officer said. Yes, Varek replied. Why? That question echoed. Because the Empire understood power. It understood domination. It understood control. But this was something else. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said. The screen flickered. Captain Kane appeared again. This time, there was no tension. No threat. Just clarity. You've seen enough, he said. A pause. We don't want war. The words were simple. But after what had just happened, they carried weight. Then why demonstrate this level of force? Varek asked. Kane didn't hesitate. Because you wouldn't have listened otherwise. Silence. No denial. No argument. Because he was right. You believe this changes our position, Illich said, stepping forward again, though weaker now. Kane looked at him. Yes, he said. Another pause. Because it already has. That truth settled into the room like gravity. The Empire's advantage. Gone. Its certainty. Broken. This isn't over, Illich said, though even he didn't sound convinced anymore. Kane nodded slightly. No, he said. It's just different now. The transmission ended. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to defend. Nothing left to prove. Only something new to understand. Set course for Dominion Prime, Varex said. The flagship turned. The fleet followed. Not as conquerors. But as survivors. As the stars stretched into lines and the ships entered faster-than-light transit, the battlefield disappeared behind them. But the impact remained. Far across the Empire. The news spread. At first, whispers. Then, reports. Then, confirmed data. An Imperial battle group. Defeated. By a single unknown vessel. In distant systems, commanders reviewed the footage. Again. And again. Trying to understand. Trying to find the flaw. Trying to restore certainty. They failed. In the core worlds, political factions shifted. Questions emerged. How could this happen? Were we wrong? What else don't we know? For the first time in thousands of cycles, the Empire was not the unquestioned authority. It was vulnerable. And beyond its borders, other civilizations were watching closely, because they had seen something they had never seen before. The Empire losing. Back on Dominion Prime, the council chambers filled once more. This time, not with confidence, but with tension. Commander Varex stood at the center again. But this time, he wasn't explaining a victory. We engaged, he said. A pause. And we lost. No one spoke. Because the truth was undeniable. They didn't overwhelm us, Varex continued. They outthought us. That statement changed everything. Because strength could be matched. Numbers could be increased. Weapons could be improved. But thinking differently? That was harder. Much harder. They're not superior, one counselor said, trying to regain control. They're different. Varex nodded. Yes, he said. And that makes them dangerous. Silence. Because now, the Empire understood something it had never needed to consider before. There was more than one path to power. And they were no longer the only ones walking it. Far away. At the edge of Imperial space. The Aegis drifted in silence. Unchallenged. Unthreatened. And somewhere beyond it. Unseen. Untracked. Other human signals began to appear. Not aggressive. Not hidden. Just present. The galaxy had changed. Not through conquest. Not through destruction. But through realization. And the Empire was only just beginning to understand what that meant. The galaxy did not change overnight. Empires rarely fall in a single moment. They fracture slowly. From within. In the cycles that followed, the Empire did not launch another attack. Not immediately. Not recklessly. For the first time in its long history. It waited. On Dominion Prime, the Council remained in constant session. Projections filled the chamber, battle reports, sensor data, theoretical models, each one attempting to explain what had happened. Each one failing in a different way. They are not stronger, one counselor insisted. They are inconsistent. They are inefficient, another argued. Unstable. They are unpredictable, a third voice said quietly. That one. No one challenged. Because unpredictability could not be optimized. It could not be calculated. It could not be controlled. And for an empire built on control, that was the real threat. Commander Varex stood at the edge of the chamber, watching the debate unfold. For the first time in his existence, he wasn't analyzing enemies. He was reconsidering assumptions. They didn't defeat us with superior force, he said finally. The room fell silent. They defeated us because we believed there was only one correct way to advance. A pause. And they proved otherwise. No one responded. Because deep down, they knew it was true. Far beyond the core, in the quiet darkness of open space, the Aegis was no longer alone. It had never been. One by one, new signals appeared. Faint at first, then clearer, then undeniable. Not one ship, not two, many, different designs, different configurations, but all sharing the same core philosophy. Redundant, resilient, unpredictable, not hidden, positioned, watching. On the bridge of the Aegis, Captain Elias Kane stood beside Dr. Hart, observing the growing network of human vessels across the stars. Status, he asked. Phase 1 complete, she replied. A pause. They're thinking now. Kane nodded slightly. That's all we needed. Do you think they'll attack again? One officer asked. Kane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out at the stars, at the signals spreading across the galaxy, at the balance shifting in real time. Not the same way, he said. A pause. They can't. Because the rules had changed. Not rewritten. Revealed. Humanity had not become the strongest force in the galaxy. It had become something far more dangerous. Something the Empire had never prepared for. An equal that didn't think like them. And that difference, that single, fundamental divergence, was enough. Enough to break certainty. Enough to force change. Enough to reshape everything that came next. Back in the Imperial Chamber, the debates continued. Plans were drafted. Strategies revised. Assumptions questioned. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, the Empire was evolving. Not because it wanted to, but because it had to. And out in the void, where stars burned silently and civilizations rose and fell, a new balance began to form. Not through domination, not through submission, but through something far rarer. Understanding. Because sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't strength. It's the willingness to think differently. And humanity had been doing that all along.